Hello, I am Tobias Silver, the Sump addict, and this appealing hole in the ground is Pwll Y Cwm. Pwll Y Cwm is in the Cladach Gorge in Wales, and it is a very notable dive. It's considered one of the classics of South Wales, and is probably one you may have heard of before. It is a lovely hole in the bottom of this river. It's about 20 metres deep, and it starts with this fairly intimidating squeeze to get in. Now, this squeeze is fairly well known for you requiring to dig to fit through. In this case, not too much. I am carrying 3 cylinders with me. I did intend to do this dive with 4, but one of them was empty when I opened it because of a valve leak. So I am just busy swinging these cylinders forwards to fit through. Now, in this case, it's just a case of me having to push myself through, but normally you would even consider things like taking a rake with you just to dig it open. And here's another thing. You can see I am not alone. I have a dive buddy. He is showing me this sump. This is one of the first times I dived it. It's quite a while ago now, but I have kept it for this, and he's diving it with a pair of 12s and an Ali 80 stage, along with some deco stages he's dropped in there. Now, this is the bit and the entrance here, and one of the things to know about Pwll Y Cwm is, despite that fairly intimidating squeeze to get in, it's actually, well, relatively simple as far as the dive goes. It's big passage. It is, some of the chambers are huge, and this means that it's a fairly simple dive, and it's a dive that a lot of the agency trained divers in the UK do. Now, you'll hear me refer to agency trained divers. I'm sure I've done it before in other videos, but what that means is that they don't take the CDG route for cave diving. Now, the CDG is a thing unique to the UK. It is a very strange setup we have, where as a dry caver you can learn to cave dive directly by basically going off doing an open water course and then learning in an apprenticeship style, the same way that we learn a lot of our kind of caving skills like SRT and that kind of stuff. And it's mostly done that way and that way only, so that the kind of cavers get a route in that doesn't require years and years and years of training, because they already know the environment and they already have some built-in respect for, you know, what it's like. Now, this has some benefits and it has some drawbacks. Obviously, learning to dive in a cave is a lot more risky than being an already competent diver and learning to take that competency into the caves. The downside is that the downside for the agency trained divers is that they don't understand the cave environment, the dry cave environment, and in the UK a lot of our sumps do require a significant amount of caving to get to. And as with all things, you don't know what you don't know. If you're putting yourself in risk and you don't know it's risky, then you're not really doing anything wrong. You're just, you shouldn't be there and you should learn more, but you're not aware of the problems you're putting yourself into. And that has a downside, and that's one of the reasons that this is a very common agency to say. It's because, well, it's fairly low consequence, except for one massive thing, which I'll get into a second. But as far as the kind of agency trained divers are concerned, you're not caving to get to this one. It's in the middle of a gorge. It's fairly accessible. You can park relatively close to it, and there is very much a defined kind of cavern zone before the entrance, and then you have the entrance into the cave. And it's a nice long and deep sump. It's about 650 metres long. You'll see these tags as we go along the line which have the distance. Some of them I'll pick up and show. And you get this really quite Floridian style sump in the UK. And that does mean that a lot of the kind of training which is based around the Floridian style in the agencies, and the kind of Mexican style as well, applies here. Now, the really important thing with this sump is where it is. So this is obviously, as I said earlier, in the Cladach Gorge, and it is the resurgence for a very large cave system called Ogof Darren Cilau. Now, Ogof Darren Cilau is a very, very big system. and is also fairly notorious in the dry caving world. Now, if you are a dry caver and you're watching this for curiosity of what diving's like in the UK, yeah, that Darren with that entrance series. And if you're not, well, let's explain what that means. So the Darren entrance series is a kilometre of really difficult crawling. It's not, impossible by any means. I've done it, but it is really, really difficult. It requires a lot of crawling. It requires some interesting kind of sideways sections that do require quite a bit of upper body strength. It's wet. It's miserable. It is really quite horrendous as far as UK caving's going. In fact, it's actually so bad they don't bother putting a gate on it, because the entrance series is enough that if someone gets through that, then, well, they know what they're doing. Now, that's quite fine if you go in that way, but at the moment we're diving into this, and for the agency trained divers, a lot of them don't have the dry caving skills to get out again, and that can be a quite big risk, and it's one of the things that I have two minds about. The other thing to point out as well is it's not like we're near the entrance either. We are a good 8 hours of caving to the entrance. I do know some people who dive in to Pwll Y Cwm, cave out, and then the next day cave back in and dive back out as a kind of split trip to see the whole system. And, that is a 8 to 10 to 12 hour trip, depending on the kind of speed at which you're going at it. So should, let's say an agency diver get out and drop his cylinder and smack the valve off, well, then he's kind of screwed. There is no two ways around that. You have really put yourself into some serious problems. Now, my buddy's dropping a stage. Me and him differ on this. I don't actually drop my stages if there is no reason to. I'll keep carrying them, because as you can see, it takes some time to drop a stage, and but that's the difference between me and him in a preference thing. I don't think what he's doing is wrong. I don't think what I'm doing is more right than what he's doing. But in general, if there's no real reason for me to drop a stage, then I don't bother. I only tend to deal with it the moment that I need to. So if there's a restriction coming up, I'll drop at the restriction, because if I have an emergency, finding that stage quicker is going to be, completely, it's going to be a very nice thing to do. I'm going to want to find that stage quicker. I'm not going to want to wait until I hit just the point where I need it, because it gives me time to swap to it, time to calm down, and every time I find that stage, I suddenly have a bit more leeway, because, the failure hasn't happened in the stages. So I'm still carrying my 7. I'm going to keep carrying it. I'm running 3 7s. Now, normally, what I wanted to do for this dive is I wanted to run 4 7s, because that's enough to get me to the end of line. However, because of the me opening one and it being empty, there was a leak in the plug for the manifold, as I'm using side mount valves. It meant that I had to do this dive with 3. So we made a decision, me and the guy I'm diving with, that when I need to turn, I'm going to turn early. And he's going to keep going to the end, and then he's going to pop his head up in the bottom of Darren Cilau, and he's going to turn around and come back, and we'll meet on the surface at the end. We're happy with it. We both do solo diving in general, so he's fairly happy with this as a concept. So we're like, okay, cool. So that was the dive plan. Now I am still running my kind of things, and I'm going to hit thirds fairly quickly. And it's not yet, it's a little bit further. We're still in kind of the deep section of this. And then I'm going to turn around and I'm going to make pace out. Now, because obviously we're swimming here upstream, we're swimming against the current, we are having a little bit of a slow route in. The way out is significantly quicker. And that's why I'm diving thirds. If you've watched some of my other videos, you may know my opinion on diving to thirds in a downstream being a bad idea, and an upstream being, just about okay. You can also see the kind of percolation from the ceiling here. That's about as low as it gets, really. As I said, it's a fairly simple sump as far as sump diving is concerned. It's maybe not feasible back mounted, especially the entrance, but that bit is possibly a little tight back mounted. But it's not so tight that you're having to remove kit, you're having to kind of force yourself through anything. And the rest of it, you get chambers that are in, double digits of length, like really dramatically big chambers, which does really kind of is so different from what most of the UK is, and that's one of the reasons that it's quite a nice dive. I have been back since. I've dived this a few times now, and I've seen it when it's so bad that, you know, you only get to see a couple centimeters of line, and I've seen it when it's so bad that so good that you can see the whole chambers. Sadly, I didn't get footage that day. I'm really annoyed I didn't, because it was really quite cool to see the really large chambers. But you know, we kept going. At this point, we're kind of starting to get to the shallower bits. I don't remember how far in this is, but we're definitely past the 300 meter point at this point. See if I go look at that tag. So these little tags here are the kind of distance markers. I didn't look at it, but they kind of show how far you get. Now the total length of the sump is 650 meters long, and the kind of total distance of the the max depth is about 20 meters, and that's for the first kind of 200 meters. It is at that depth. It then shallows to about 10, and it stays at that depth for another 200, and then it slowly rises to 0 right at the end of it. Now, I didn't manage to get to the beginning of the slow rise, but I managed to get quite a significant portion into the 10 meter section. So this is the point where I'm turning around. I am signaling to my buddy that I'm going to turn around and I'm going to leave, and I do that. I turn around and I leave. So, as I said earlier, this is part of the dive plan that we had set out, is that I was going to turn when I needed to turn, and I did manage to get about 400 meters in, and that meant that, you know, with another 7 I should be able to get the whole way. And then the next dive I did it with 4, and I did get the whole way, and I saw the lovely bits of caving right at the bottom. Now, because we were diving upstream, we were diving into the flow, coming across my buddy's bottle there, so I've cut a fair amount of the way out, because you can see here the viz. It's gotten worse. It's specky. It is small amounts of problems for the footage, so what's the point showing it? So I'm just going to kind of cut stuff down. Now, as you can see, like, even though it's a little bit specky, the viz is still pretty okay, and we did find this on a good day. As I said, like, I've done it where you cannot even see a single thing. You are just following along the line, and you can't see. You can just touch the sump, and you cannot kind of see anything. Now we've hit the kind of prominent corner as well, which is really close to the entrance, and really it kind of shows just how kind of speedily you can get out here. I did cut quite a bit of time out of this. This was a 50-minute dive, but I find watching the entire dive, especially like this where it's not very interesting, the actual passage or anything like that, is fairly boring. You can see my pegs, which I am retrieving. Now, that's an interesting thing. In the UK, we tend to use clothes pegs for the line rather than cookies. Now, if you're a cave diver from Florida or Mexico, you'll be aware of the cookies. And the reason we don't use cookies and we use clothes pegs is because this line is a 6mm line, I think. The line in some of the sumps can be up to 10mm, and even some of it can be steel cable or washing line or all sorts of mad things to make sure that it actually, you know, survives the intermittent flow we get. Now, unlike Florida, where there's a consistent spring output and it doesn't tend to vary much, it tends to be very high flow or slightly less than very high flow. In the UK, because it's all river caves, we have, you know, no flow to horrendous amounts of flow, you know, in the same week sometimes, because of our climate. It rains quite a lot here. This means that our line has to be a lot more hardcore, because we can't lay it for one condition, because it will experience all of them. If we lay it really taut for the high flow, and you can, you know, then we have problems when the flow slows. If you lay it really kind of good for the statics, then you have problems when the high flow comes along, and this causes loads of line breaks and loads of issues with the line. The clothes pegs work with different thicknesses, which is quite nice, unlike the others. You see there, we're back to blue polyprop. This is 10mm blue polyprop, And we're also back to my buddy's reel. Now, my buddy had set the line. There's his deco stage as well, which he has there. Now, the reason we keep a deco stage here is you shouldn't need decompression for the dive on the way in. And on the way out, if you've had, you know, let's say half an hour waiting in the exit, then you don't need a deco stage. However, if you have turned right before the exit, you can have up to about 10 to 15 minutes of decompression, which is obviously far from ideal, especially in an upwelling current. So you obviously want to cut that short. I'm swinging my cylinder forward again to get through this. Now, the other thing to notice about this is this way out, I am finding a little bit more squeezy than the way in. Now, this is fairly common. When you go in, you kind of dislodge stuff and knock stuff forward a little bit. But this is quite a bit more difficult, and it really shows quite how quickly this kind of gravel bank is refilling. Now, one of the things about this dive is obviously I had that issue with the cylinder not being full because of the valve failure. I'd have some other failures on this dive as well. However, none of them happened while I was in the cave. They all happened around about now, really. So this has got a lovely little place to sit at 6 meters. And as I was sitting at 6 meters to do my safety stop, as I hadn't accrued any deco, two of the swivels that I have, the low pressure swivels for my regulators, decided to free flow. So the O-ring must have burst, and there was just, you know, loads of water coming out of them. So I shut down both of them and breathed off the other one. But it really was a bit of a surprise for me. I've never had two things go wrong at once. It would have been recoverable. I would have been able to feather the valve. It's a technique you learn when you're cave diving, so that you can kind of shut the valve off, open it, breathe, shut the valve, open it, breathe. But yeah, that was an interesting experience. And here we come back out. You can see the kind of slow rise up, and you can see how they've put in climbing anchors to tie the line into, which is pretty sweet. But here we surface in the Clanet Gorge, and it's the end of a lovely dive. I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you enjoy this stuff, subscribe to the channel, and have a good rest of your day.